Well, hello everybody and welcome to what is sure to be a non-video. Oh dear me.
Today's video is sponsored by Squarespace. One of my favourite photography quotes of all time is by 𝘭𝘪𝘯𝘬𝘴, and it goes like this. To me, photography is an art of observation. It's about finding something interesting in an ordinary place. I found it has little to do with things you see and everything to do with the way you see them. I think this couldn't be more fitting for today's video.
So I've decided to come out in my van. It's been a while actually since I've just taken the van out for a good run, camped over somewhere. I've got my camera gear in the back. But I've got to say, the weather in the UK for the past about 2 or 3 weeks has been really grim. It's been mild, wet and windy. And for the foreseeable future, I'm talking extended forecast of up to 4 weeks, it's not forecast to change as weather front after weather front moves in, circles around the UK, constantly bringing in rain showers, wet, mild, miserable air. So for anybody that may be on this channel for the first time, I'm a landscape photographer and I like to come out in my van and take photographs. But I've got to be honest with you, this very well might just be a van video, because looking out of the window there should be the most beautiful view across the Northumbrian hills. But yeah, sadly it's all pretty clagged in, bit of a pea soup. So as it stands, I'm just a man in a van. So just before I left to come away this afternoon, this arrived in the post. And this Nikon Z7 II has an absolutely horrendous, filthy sensor. Oh man, it's so bad. Check this out, hang on. So I'm putting my aperture to f/22, and it's like a 5-second exposure or something like that, and I'm just moving the camera around, photographing the roof of my van. And wait till you see how many dust spots are on this sensor. So cleaning your sensor is easy, and it's not something you should be afraid of. But what you definitely need to do is make sure that your image stabilization, if you have it, is switched off. And you take a cleaning swab, and then you just get your cleaning fluid and put 2 drops just on the edge of the swab. And then with your swab at about 60 degrees, you just wipe one way and then back the other way. And it's as simple as that. Now I'm going to take the same photograph of of the roof of my van and compare it, and hopefully we should have an almost spotless sensor. Let's have a look. Much better, absolutely spotless. Now all we need is something to photograph, which oh, ain't happening tonight. It's all hanging, all hinging on tomorrow morning. So I'm guessing your coffee goes in there, that goes in there, and then that screws there. And that's where your coffee comes out. But where does your water go? Right, how hard can this be? Fill this up. Oh yeah, what a mess. Oh no. Well, I've cleaned my sensor, I've attempted to make a coffee with that little gadget thing, and I've just made a cheese and ham toastie. It's 7 o'clock and I am bored. bored. I'm going to sit back, enjoy my cheese and ham toastie and dream of what could be, but probably won't be tomorrow morning. Well, it's been a long, uneventful night, so I'm going to go to sleep and keep my fingers crossed for some photography in the morning, because after all, that is why we're here. Right, okay. See you all in the morning. Well, good morning, everybody. Oh, and what a miserable morning it is. Cold, windy, and as dull as dishwater. And when I got out of my van this morning, I thought to myself, there's absolutely nothing to photograph. What a waste of time. But that's not the case. Let me tell you a story. When I was 16 years old, I'd just enrolled in college to do media production and photography. And I remember my first lesson in photography, sat in a classroom, and on the whiteboard, the tutor, the lecturer, was trying to explain the exposure triangle. Now, I've never ever been good in a classroom situation. I can't pay attention. I've got a very, very short attention span. So I remember zoning out and just all this aperture, ISO, shutter speed, overexposing, underexposing. It was all just going over my head. And before I knew it, I was just lost in a daydream. And all I wanted to do was get a camera in my hand and take photographs. And I remember sat in this classroom, which was a sterile council building classroom. And I remember thinking, if I had to challenge myself to take one good photograph in this classroom, what would it be? And I started looking at the corners of the room, the way that the walls met the windowsill and the light was coming through the window, the way that the trunking for the cables, the wiring in the college was running down the wall, and looking at that on a macro level. And I probably spent about the best part of 20 minutes daydreaming about all the possible images there were in this classroom. And whilst I should have been learning about the exposure triangle, but it all was just going over my head as I was lost in a daydream. Sorry, the microphone on my battery just died. But yes, as I was saying, I spent the entire lesson in college daydreaming about all of the images that I could make in this sterile classroom, rather than actually learning, which is probably what I should have done. I was just so keen to get a camera in my hand and start creating images. And that story brings me nicely onto today, because this morning is not, at first glance, no good. The area that I'm in is not great. It's all plantation woodland. It's all very managed. It's very messy, very scruffy. The weather's bad, the light's bad. It's just uninspiring and, quite frankly, miserable. But is it? Because all you've got to do is be open to opportunities and be open-minded and look for images. In a sterile classroom where there are no images, I spent 20 minutes looking for images, and I think I may have found some. And it's the same here this morning. And to my surprise, here we have a fantastic scene which I am very excited to get stuck into. So not too far from my van, and down a trail that kind of passes through these plantation woodlands, I came across this small river. And I thought, wherever there's water, there is potential. That's my view. And I noticed that there was lots of foam on the surface of the river. We've had a lot of bad weather recently, so all this foam gets whipped up by all the rivers in spate. And that foam really piqued my interest. So I started exploring the banks of this river, and I found this area where all of the foam, for whatever reason I don't know, seems to be gathering. I think it might be the wind blowing it against the bank of the river, and it's just collecting and gathering around this area, and it looks like snow, and it's got fantastic colour and texture, and the way that it interacts with the trees on the riverbank going into the foam and giving that contrast, all these abstract patterns and shapes and the potential. So I'm going to explore it and see what images there are, if there are any images. I have taken one where the branches of this tree are hanging over the foam and we have this contrast and this interaction with the foam and the branch. Very difficult for me to frame. I ended up going handheld because I couldn't get my tripod in the right position. So yeah, that's the first image of today. And when I woke up this morning and saw the stormy skies and the plantation woodlands, well, it's not the type of image I was expecting to shoot, but that's the thing with landscape photography. You should always keep an open mind.
Okay, so these images, they're not the greatest, but considering the circumstances and what I was working with, I don't think they're too bad. For me personally, I prefer the final image, image number 3, but let me know in your comments if these are any good and if I, in fact, should have bothered taking them.
So after following the river, I ended up going full circle and ended up back at the van. I didn't see anything else that quite piqued my interest as much as, well, that foam on the water. But yeah, I've had every time I come out, right, every time I come out when I don't think I'm going to get an image, I'm always incredibly pleasantly surprised when and if I do get an image. Because for me, landscape photography it's all about the process. It's a fantastic hobby. And basically what that means is I don't only go out when the conditions are perfect, and I don't only shoot when I travel to exotic locations. I like to go out on any given day to any random location and just see if I can create an image. Because if I get stuck in this cycle of only going out when conditions look like they're going to be perfect and only going to the world's best locations, I don't know, I'd feel like I'm not growing and learning as a photographer. Anyway, I feel like I'm really rambling on. Now that I'm back at the van doesn't mean the photography's over. I have a beautiful drive and I'm in the mood, you know. I want to keep my eye out for things as I'm driving, making my way through this beautiful county of Northumberland. I want to say a quick thank you to the sponsor of this video, which is Squarespace. If you don't know who Squarespace are, they're an all-in-one website building platform. So as a photographer, if you're looking for a website to showcase your work and sell prints and products and that kind of thing, but you don't know where to begin or how to build yourself a website or how to get a domain or anything like that, well, you can do it all through Squarespace. Register your domain, build your own website using a simple, intuitive drag and drop system that you can learn in a day, and after a few days you'll have yourself a beautifully professional looking website. They've got 24/7 customer service, and it really is simple and straightforward. So if you fancy yourself a photography website or any website, go to squarespace.com/Heaton where you get a free try. And if you like that free trial, use the use the offer code Heaton for 10% off your first purchase. So I'm gonna drive off now, and I'm hoping that this video isn't quite over yet. All right, well, I am happy to report that it's not over yet. I'm just turning around because I've just driven past something that looks really interesting, and I'm hoping that I can park nearby and shoot it because it's right on the edge of the road. But yeah, it looks good. So I don't know if you saw last week's video where I went out with my Hasselblad X-Pan and I ended up photographing these beautiful group of trees in gorgeous light with a bit of mist and fog. And what got me excited or intrigued with that image was the story, because we had young saplings growing either side of these ancient arcing trees, which I thought looked great. I've just driven past the scene of it's just forestry commission, it's just pine trees, but they've all been battered and blown down in the wind. So you've got these fallen trees forming the most beautiful abstract crisscross patterns, and the light was beautiful, and all this just happened in a split second as I drove past. So I'm hoping now that I'm going to get my camera, go out and make an image. But yeah, this really piqued my interest again, so fingers crossed we're on for another image or two. This will be great. So I am right by the road and I hate shooting by the road. It's not because I love nature and hate anything man-made, it's just because everybody looks at you. Everybody thinks that you're photographing some wildlife or something really interesting, and actually when people stop and question what I'm doing, I often lie and say, oh, I've just seen a deer or an otter or an osprey or a kingfisher, because the truth that I'm photographing bubbly foam on a river or, you know, fallen pine trees, a lot of people just don't get it. So what really got my attention with this image when I drove past was the abstract nature of it, the crisscross shapes formed by the falling trees. And then there's a bit of a story because we have fallen trees, we have standing trees, and we have some new growth in the foreground. Whether or not the new growth will make it into the composition, I'm not sure, because looking at it, it's distracting, it looks messy, and I'm not actually sure it's worth including it. But for now, I've just framed up my first composition where we have 3 fallen trees. So we've got 2 like this and 1 in the middle, so it's a bit like a feather, like a fan, and it's just fantastic. And then we have lots of horizontal trees in the foreground framing around it, and it just looks great. It's a really pleasing composition, and I think what I enjoy the most is that it's not really an obvious image. It's quite understated, and I like that. So yeah, very pleased with this first composition, but looking at this sort of 50-meter stretch of fallen trees, it looks like there could be quite a few different ways to shoot it, different compositions, different angles. So yeah, pretty happy with this.
So I continued to photograph this scene using my 100 to 400mm lens and ended up coming away with 2 images, the first of which you've already seen me shoot, and a second image which I think is the stronger of the 2, but much like my first set of images, I don't feel like these are necessarily my best work, although I had a great time shooting them. But let me know what you think in the comments below, much appreciated.
I think that is now me done. Very satisfied with how today's gone, considering the conditions I was up against. Oh. Actually, do you know, it wasn't the weather conditions I was up against. I was up against myself, if that makes any sense. You know, it's all about your state of mind, whether or not you're feeling creative or inspired. And yeah, man, I know I've said it 1,000 times in this video, but last night and this morning, I thought there was not going to be a photograph to have. And, well, I'd wasted my time, but it just took that one spark of inspiration, that one little thing, which in my case just happened to be a bit of messy white foam on the edge of a riverbank. That was it. And that got my juices flowing, got my creativity flowing, and then we saw the fallen trees. And I have no idea to this point if any of the images are any good. It's difficult to judge on the back of a camera. But it's not necessarily about the images, it's about feeling positive and feeling creative. And I hope, you know, I like to think that when I put out a video, it does some good to the photography community, you know, whether that's through inspiration or, you know, things to avoid, or in this instance, just to encourage people to not rely on the weather and the epic locations, but just to get out regardless. Get outside, stretch your legs, and don't burden yourself with expectations of grandeur. Just keep an eye out, keep an open mind. Right, I'm getting well cheesy now, so it's time for me to go. I appreciate everybody watching, and I really hope to see you all next time. Thank you very much.